So this is quite interesting. You know, years ago, Malcolm X said that Black women are the least protected, and that sentiment rings true. So I'm going to talk about the Shits and Gigs podcast that's hosted by James Duncan and Fuhad Dawodu. And they're popular influencers in the UK. They traveled to the United States over the summer and made quite the stir. And when I say quite the stir, not in a good way. So first, they declared on the Poor Minds podcast that of all the places they visited in the United States, they saw the least amount of baddies or beautiful women in Atlanta. Now, that's quite surprising because Atlanta is very diverse and it also has a surprising Black population. So when they made this comment, it's interpreted to mean that they're talking about Black women. Now, they said this even as they were speaking to two Black women. But to be clear, the host responded by saying that they weren't from Atlanta. One says she was from Houston. And they didn't offer any kind of pushback or defense of Black women. Now, needless to say, there are countless men and women in Atlanta who would disagree with the sentiment. But my question is, who do these hosts think they are to travel to another country to reference a city that is predominantly Black and then to say something like they saw the least amount of beautiful women in that area? The audacity to come or to go to another country and denigrate any group of people, let alone Black women, or reduce Black women to their physical appearance, it is just stunning. Now, after this clip surfaced, of course, people started digging into these particular hosts and their show, and they also found an interview where Andrew Schultz appeared, and his podcast is Flagrant, but the host of Shits and Gigs appeared on Andrew's podcast, and Andrew spewed racist and harmful language and stereotypes about Black women. And James and Fuhad, they laughed. They did not push back. They didn't disagree. They didn't offer even the slightest amount of defense of Black women. Now, that Schultz is anti-Black doesn't surprise me. What does surprise me is that he felt comfortable spewing racist language in front of two Black men. He likely assumed that they valued Black life as little as he did. Now, some may say, okay, well, these are just jokes. There's no harm in jokes. But jokes contribute to narratives, and narratives shape preference, policy, and action. If you wonder why Black women and girls are 40% more likely to be victims of sex trafficking, it's because so few people view our lives as valuable and worthy of protection. It's because from youth, we are seen as less deserving of protection. If you wonder why Black women and girls are more likely to experience intimate partner violence, it's because so few people see our lives as valuable. Even think about the hate that Black women and women of color, for that matter, receive online. Several years ago, Amnesty International released a report, and they indicated that Black women and girls experience an exorbitant amount of harassment online. And it's not just Black women and girls, but also women of color. If you wonder why Black women are least likely to report a crime or to be believed when they do, it's because of the broader ecosystem that supports racism, anti-Blackness, and misogyny. Now, for persons who are still saying, but it was a joke, we have to think about the people who are most likely to be the butt of jokes, and that is people with the least amount of power. In the United States, that is often Black women, it's immigrants, it's persons who live in poverty, it's persons with disabilities. Because attacks on Black women have been normalized, neither Schultz or the host of the Shits and Gigs podcast thought twice about engaging in anti-Blackness, misogyny, or racist stereotypes. And even when called out, Schultz stood firm, understanding that few would hold him accountable for verbally attacking Black women. Now, to be clear, everyone is entitled to preference, but preference does not have to include a denunciation of any group. You can love someone from one group without hating another group. But also understand that in America, at least, who you love is shaped and influenced by what is presented before you as ideal or optimal. And often that is not Black women. Think about the images of beauty that we see in popular culture, that we see on the television, that we see in movies. A lot of times, Black women are not held up as the ideal or as the preference. So when I think about the marriage rates for Black women, I'm reminded that more than individual preference is at play. Think about the decades of conditioning around desirability and preference. What disturbs me about James and Fuhad is their actions aren't just an articulation of preference, but a denunciation of Black women, and they didn't have to do it. And they did this even as their audience is primarily composed of Black women. They didn't think there would be backlash because Black women are so rarely protected. Now, I don't wish ill on anyone, and yet I recognize that were James or Fuhad to become a hashtag, the people who would be at the front lines demanding justice and keeping their name and their legacy at the forefront will be Black women. Now, to be clear, they apologized, but was their apology sincere? You be the judge.